The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and fear. And Bethany Morgan had never felt more alone in her life as she clutched the manila folder containing her diagnosis, her hands shaking so badly the papers inside rustled like autumn leaves. She had come to New York 3 years ago with nothing but a journalism degree and dreams bigger than her small-town Missouri roots would ever allow. Now, at 26, she had finally landed a staff position at Metropolitan magazine, covering business and finance. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd spent the last 6 months writing about other people's successes, while her own body was quietly betraying her. The tumor was benign. The neurologist had assured her with the kind of practiced calm that probably worked on most patients. But it was growing, pressing against her optic nerve, and without surgery, she'd lose vision in her left eye within months. With surgery, there were risks. Significant risks. The kind that made you sign forms acknowledging you might not wake up the same person or at all. Bethany walked out of Mount Sinai Hospital into the crisp October air, trying to breathe normally. She had 4 weeks until the surgery. 4 weeks to get her affairs in order, whatever that meant for someone whose entire life fit into a 600-square-foot studio apartment in Queens. Her phone buzzed. Her editor, Marcus, wanted her at the office immediately. Something about an exclusive interview opportunity that had just fallen into their laps. The Metropolitan magazine offices occupied the 32nd floor of a building in Midtown, all glass and chrome and people who moved with purpose. Bethany loved it here, loved the energy, the constant hum of deadlines and breaking stories. Today, though, everything felt surreal, like she was watching her life through a pane of frosted glass. "Bethany," Marcus practically sprinted from his office, his tie askew, coffee stain on his shirt. "Where have you been? I've been calling." "Doctor's appointment," she said, which was true enough. "What's going on, Preston Irving?" The Preston Irving agreed to an interview. "With you." Bethany's exhaustion momentarily lifted. Preston Irving was a legend in manufacturing. A 33-year-old CEO who had inherited his family's struggling automotive parts company 7 years ago and transformed it into a billion-dollar empire. Irving Industries now supplied components to every major car manufacturer in North America and was expanding into aerospace. He was notoriously private, rarely gave interviews, and when he did, it was usually to the Wall Street Journal or Forbes. "Why me?" Bethany asked, suspicion creeping in. "Why Metropolitan? Apparently he read your piece on sustainable manufacturing practices last month. His PR team reached out this morning. He wants to talk about his new initiative to convert all Irving Industries facilities to renewable energy by 2028. Marcus grabbed her shoulders. "This is huge, Beth. This could put you on the map. 4 weeks until surgery. 4 weeks until everything might change. When?" she asked. "Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. His office in Connecticut." Bethany nodded, already mentally preparing questions, pushing thoughts of tumors and operating rooms into a dark corner of her mind. Work was safe. Work made sense. That night, she researched Preston Irving until her eyes burned. The photos showed a tall man with dark hair, strong features, and the kind of presence that translated even through a camera lens. He'd been engaged once, 5 years ago, to a socialite named Caroline something or other, but it had ended abruptly. Since then, nothing. No scandals, no tabloid fodder, just relentless business success. The drive to Irving Industries headquarters in Stamford took 90 minutes through traffic that made Bethany question every life choice that had brought her to the Northeast. The building itself was unexpected, a sleek modern structure surrounded by preserved woodland. Preston Irving apparently practiced what he preached about environmental responsibility. The lobby was all natural materials, reclaimed wood and stone, with living walls of plants that actually cleaned the air. A receptionist with perfect posture directed her to the top floor. Preston Irving's assistant, an efficient woman named Helen who looked about 50 and had kind eyes, greeted Bethany personally. "Mr. Irving is running a few minutes behind. He's on a call with the Tokyo office. Can I get you coffee? Water? Water would be great, thank you." Bethany waited in an anteroom that had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Connecticut woods. Fall colors blazed orange and red against a blue sky so perfect it hurt to look at. She thought about the surgery again, about the possibility that this view, this autumn, might be one of the last things she'd see clearly. "Miss Morgan," she turned, and Preston Irving was nothing like his photographs. He was taller for one thing, probably 6'3" with broad shoulders under a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. But it was his eyes that caught her, dark and intense, with an intelligence that felt like being seen under a spotlight. "Mr. Irving." She stood, extending her hand. His handshake was firm, warm. "Preston, please. Thank you for coming all this way." His voice was deeper than she'd expected, with a slight roughness that suggested he'd been talking too much. "And I apologize for the delay. International calls have a way of expanding to fill whatever time you don't have." He gestured for her to follow him into his office, which was surprisingly understated. Yes, it was large with those same incredible windows, but the furniture was practical, the desk covered in actual paperwork, not just for show. Engineering diagrams covered one wall. A coffee maker that looked well used sat on a credenza. "So," Preston said, settling into a chair across from her rather than behind his desk, "you wrote that piece about sustainable manufacturing. The one that actually understood the economic challenges instead of just preaching about saving the planet." Bethany pulled out her recorder. "May I?" "Of course." She said it between them. "I try to be realistic. Companies won't change unless it makes financial sense." "Exactly." He leaned forward, animated now. "Everyone wants to talk about corporate responsibility, but they ignore the fact that businesses need to be profitable to exist. My renewable energy initiative isn't altruism. It's smart economics. Energy costs are predictable. We control our own supply, and the tax incentives make the ROI timeline reasonable." They talked for an hour, then two. Preston was articulate and passionate, with none of the corporate speak Bethany usually had to translate from CEO interviews. He talked about his workers, about communities where Irving Industries had factories, about legacy and what kind of world he wanted to leave behind. "You don't have children," Bethany said, checking her notes. "Is that part of thinking about legacy, making the company itself your legacy?" Something flickered across his face. "I don't have children yet, but that's not why I care about the future." He paused. "My father died when I was 26. Heart attack, completely unexpected. He was 52. I inherited this company before I was ready, before I knew what I was doing, and I realized that nothing is guaranteed. Not time, not tomorrow, not anything. So you do what matters while you can." Bethany's chest tightened. 26. She was 26, 4 weeks until surgery. "Are you all right?" Preston asked, his eyes sharp. "Fine, yes, sorry." She glanced at her recorder. "I think I have everything I need," but Preston didn't move. "You went pale just then. Do you need water, food?" "Helen can order something. I'm fine, really. It's been a long day." He studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away. "You're lying, but I won't push. Can I at least make sure you have something to eat before you drive back? It's almost 5. Traffic will be terrible, and I'd feel responsible if you fainted on I-95. Despite everything, Bethany smiled. "I don't faint. Humor me anyway." They ended up in the executive dining room, which was empty at this hour. Preston pulled things from a refrigerator that looked like it belonged in a restaurant. Fresh bread, cheese, some kind of pasta salad, fruit. "You keep a lot of food here," Bethany observed. "I work late. Helen worries. This is her solution." He assembled 2 plates with surprising efficiency. "I actually like cooking, but I'm usually too tired to bother when I get home." "Where's home?" "I have a house about 10 minutes from here, on the water." He handed her a plate. "What about you? Where in New York, Queens?" "Astoria." "Small apartment, no water view, but there's a Greek restaurant downstairs that makes the best spanakopita you've ever tasted." They ate, and somehow the conversation shifted from professional to personal. Preston asked about her journalism career, her family back in Missouri, what had brought her to New York. She found herself telling him about her small hometown, about being the first person in her family to finish college, about wanting to write stories that mattered. "Why business journalism?" he asked. "Not to diminish it, but you seem like you'd want to cover something more obviously impactful. Investigative work, maybe." "Business impacts everything," Bethany said. "Who has jobs, who has health care, what communities survive or disappear. You want to understand the world." "Follow the money." Preston smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "You sound like my father. He used to say that capitalism was just human nature written large, and if you wanted to change human behavior, you had to understand the incentives." Smart man. He was. Preston's expression softened. "I miss him every day, especially when I make a decision I'm not sure about. I wonder what he'd think." The vulnerability in his voice surprised her. This wasn't the untouchable CEO from the photographs, the man who'd built a billion-dollar empire. This was someone who still missed his father, who questioned himself, who was human. Bethany's phone buzzed. Marcus, asking if she'd survived the interview. She typed a quick response. "I should let you get back," Preston said. "But would you consider having dinner with me? Not for the article. Just dinner." Her heart did something complicated. "Mr. Irving." "Preston, I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" He held up a hand. "Wait, that's pushy. Let me try again. I enjoyed talking with you, not as a journalist, just as a person." "I'd like to do it again without the recorder running. If you're not interested, that's completely fine. But if you're worried about professional boundaries, the article's done. You have what you need." Bethany should have said no. She had 4 weeks until surgery, until everything became uncertain. She had no business starting something with anyone, let alone a billionaire CEO who lived in a different world than she did. "I'd like that," she heard herself say. Preston's smile was worth the illogic. "Friday night, I can come into the city. You pick the place. There's an Italian restaurant in the West Village I've been wanting to try. Osteria Morini. I'll make a reservation. 7 o'clock, she nodded, gathering her things, wondering what she was doing. Preston walked her to the elevator. "Drive safe. Text me when you get home so I know you made it." "You don't have my number." He pulled out his phone. Problem easily solved. They exchanged numbers, and Bethany felt like a teenager again, giddy and nervous. The elevator doors opened. "See you Friday," Preston said. "Friday," she agreed. The drive back to New York passed in a blur. Bethany couldn't stop thinking about Preston's eyes, his voice, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only person in the room. It was ridiculous. It was impossible. It was the last thing she needed in her life right now. But she couldn't stop smiling. The next 2 days crawled by. Bethany wrote the article, which Marcus declared brilliant and immediately slotted for the cover of next month's issue. She tried to focus on other assignments, but her mind kept drifting to Friday, to dinner, to Preston. She told herself this was just a distraction. A pleasant interlude before her surgery. Nothing serious, nothing real. Friday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that made New York magical. Bethany changed outfits 4 times before settling on a simple black dress and boots, elegant but not trying too hard. She took the subway into Manhattan, arriving at Osteria Morini 15 minutes early. Preston was already there. He stood when he saw her, wearing dark jeans and a gray sweater that made him look less like a CEO and more like someone you'd want to spend hours talking to. "You look beautiful." "You're early." "I'm always early. Habit from my father. He said if you're not early, you're late." They were seated at a corner table, intimate and quiet despite the restaurant's energy. A candle flickered between them. Preston ordered wine, a Barolo that the sommelier approved of enthusiastically. "To new friendships," Preston said, raising his glass. "Friendships," Bethany echoed, though the way he looked at her suggested he was thinking of something more. They talked through appetizers, through entrees, through dessert. Preston told her about growing up in Connecticut, about pressure of the Irving name, about wanting to be an architect before his father died and responsibility crashed down on him. "You regret it?" Bethany asked. "Not pursuing architecture. Sometimes. But then I think about the 15,000 people who work for Irving Industries, about their families, their lives. That matters. That's building something real, even if it's not buildings. You care about them, your employees." That came through in the interview. "They're not abstractions, they're people. My father taught me that." Preston set down his fork. "Enough about me, tell me something real, something you don't usually share." Bethany's heart raced. This was the moment. She should tell him about the surgery, about the tumor, about the uncertainty hanging over her life like a sword. But the words stuck in her throat. "I'm afraid," she said finally, "that I'm not good enough, that I don't deserve the success I'm starting to have. That someone will realize I'm just a girl from Missouri who's faking it." Preston reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "That's called imposter syndrome, and everyone successful has it. You know why? Because people who are actually faking it never doubt themselves. Your fear means you care about doing good work." His hand was warm, solid. "Real. Thank you," she whispered. They left the restaurant at midnight, walking through the West Village streets under streetlights that turned everything golden. Preston's hand found hers, and it felt natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. "I have a confession," Preston said. "I didn't just agree to that interview because of your article. No, my PR team sent me your portfolio. I read everything you'd written. You have this way of seeing people, of understanding what drives them, and I thought, I want to meet this person. I want to talk to someone who sees the world this clearly." Bethany stopped walking. "Preston." He turned to face her, still holding her hand. "Too honest." "No, just unexpected." She took a breath. "I have a confession too. I shouldn't be doing this." His expression shifted, guarded now. "Because of work, or because you're not interested?" "Because I'm not sure what my life looks like 4 weeks from now." Preston frowned. "What does that mean?" And there, under a streetlight in the West Village with her hand in his, Bethany told him. About the tumor, about the surgery, about the risks and the fear and the uncertainty. She told him everything she'd been holding inside since that morning in the hospital waiting room. When she finished, Preston was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry," Bethany said. "I shouldn't have told you. I shouldn't have agreed to dinner. This isn't fair to you." "Bethany, stop." Preston stepped closer, his hands framing her face. "Do you remember what I said about my father?" "About nothing being guaranteed," she nodded, not trusting her voice. "I meant it. Time isn't promised. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed. So if I want to spend time with someone remarkable, someone who makes me laugh and think and feel things I haven't felt in years, I'm not going to let fear stop me." His thumb brushed her cheek. "Unless you don't want this, that's the only thing that matters." "I want this," Bethany said. "I'm terrified, but I want this." Preston kissed her then, soft and careful and full of promise. The world narrowed to his lips, his hands, the solid warmth of him. When they broke apart, Bethany was shaking. "Come home with me," Preston said. "Not for anything except being together. I have a guest room, you can have space, but I don't want tonight to end yet." She should have said no. She should have been practical, protected her heart, kept her distance. "Okay," she said. Preston had a car waiting, which seemed excessive until they were heading north and Bethany realized she'd completely forgotten he lived in Connecticut. The drive took an hour, and they spent it talking, Preston's hand holding hers in the darkness. His house was on the water, modern and open, with windows that would show the sound in daylight. Now, at 2 in the morning, it was just darkness and the sound of waves. "Guest room is upstairs, second door on the left," Preston said. "Or there's the couch, if you prefer being downstairs." "I'm the last door at the end of the hall." Bethany walked through the house, taking in the space. It was beautifully designed, clearly expensive, but it felt lived in. Books everywhere, a guitar in the corner, photographs of Preston with people who were obviously family. "Your mother?" she asked, pointing to a photo of Preston with an elegant woman who had his eyes. "Yes, she lives in Florida now. Remarried a few years ago to a man who makes her laugh. I like him. You see her often, not as much as I should." Preston pulled off his jacket. "Are you hungry? Thirsty?" "I can make coffee," which I realize sounds ridiculous at 2 in the morning. "Coffee sounds perfect, actually." They ended up in the kitchen, a chef's dream with restaurant-grade appliances and a view of the water. Preston made coffee with the kind of focus he probably brought to everything, and they sat at the island, shoulders touching. "Tell me about the surgery," Preston said. "What happens?" So Bethany explained, the medical terminology mixing with her own fear. Preston listened without interrupting, his hand on her back, steady and grounding. 4 weeks, he said when she finished. "That's November 14th. "Yes." "Okay, so we have 4 weeks." Preston turned to face her fully. "I know this is fast. I know this is probably crazy. But I want to spend those 4 weeks with you. As much as you'll let me. I want every moment." Bethany's eyes burned. "Why? You don't even know me." "I know enough. I know you're brilliant and brave and you see the world in ways that make me want to see it better. I know that when you smile, really smile, it lights up your whole face. I know that you came to interview me when you were probably terrified about your diagnosis, and you did your job beautifully anyway." He cupped her face. "I know that I haven't felt this way about anyone in years, maybe ever. And I'm not going to waste the time we have being cautious." "I'm scared," Bethany whispered. "I know, me too. But let's be scared together." She kissed him again, deeper this time, her hands in his hair. Preston made a sound low in his throat, pulling her closer. The kiss turned urgent, desperate, like they were trying to pack a lifetime into this moment. "Bethany," Preston breathed against her lips. "We should stop." "Why?" "Because I want this to mean something. I want to do this right." She pulled back, searching his face. "You're serious?" "Completely. You're not someone I want to rush." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Stay tonight. Let me make you breakfast tomorrow. Let's figure this out step by step." Bethany stayed. She took the guest room, but she barely slept, too aware of Preston down the hall, too aware of the ticking clock counting down to her surgery. Morning came with weak November sunlight filtering through unfamiliar windows. Bethany found Preston already awake, cooking in the kitchen, music playing softly from hidden speakers. "Morning," he said, looking rumpled and perfect in sweatpants and a t-shirt. "I hope you like pancakes." They ate breakfast watching the sun rise over the Sound, and it felt domestic in a way that should have scared Bethany but instead felt right. Like this was where she was supposed to be. "I need to tell you something," Preston said, setting down his coffee. "I want to be there for your surgery." "With you, I mean, in the hospital." "Preston, that's too much. We barely know each other." "Then let's change that. Spend time with me. Let me spend time with you. 4 weeks, Bethany. Let's make them count." So they did. Preston came to the city on Saturday. They walked through Central Park, watched the leaves fall, held hands like teenagers. He met her for lunch on Monday, showing up at the metropolitan offices with Thai food and making Marcus practically fall over himself with excitement at having Preston Irving in their conference room. "You're dating Preston Irving," Marcus hissed when Preston stepped out to take a call. "Do you know what this could mean for your career?" "This isn't about my career," Bethany said firmly. "He's not a story. He's a person. A person who's worth about $2 billion. I don't care about his money, Marcus." And she didn't. The money, the success, the empire, none of it mattered compared to the way Preston made her laugh, the way he listened to her talk about articles she was working on, the way he looked at her like she was precious. They fell into a rhythm. Preston worked from his New York apartment 2 days a week so they could spend evenings together. Bethany drove to Connecticut on weekends. They cooked together, watched movies, talked until dawn. Preston introduced her to his mother via video call, and Mrs. Irving was warm and welcoming and made Bethany promise to visit Florida soon. 2 weeks before the surgery, Preston asked Bethany to move in with him. "Not permanently," he clarified quickly. "Just for recovery. You'll need someone after the surgery, and your apartment has stairs." "My house is all on one level. I can work from home. Let me take care of you." Bethany wanted to argue, wanted to maintain her independence, wanted to protect herself from depending on him too much. But the truth was, she was terrified of being alone after the surgery. "Okay," she said. "But I'm paying rent," Preston laughed. "Absolutely not. Then I'm cooking dinner every night I'm physically able. Deal." 10 days before surgery, they made love for the first time. It wasn't planned, wasn't calculated. They were watching a movie at Preston's house, and Bethany looked at him, really looked at him, and thought that if something went wrong during surgery, she would regret not having this memory. "Preston," she said, and he understood immediately. He took her to his bedroom, and it was slow and careful and achingly tender. Preston touched her like she was made of light, and when he moved inside her, Bethany felt like they were creating something sacred. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, Bethany cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming intensity of it all. Preston held her, murmuring reassurances into her hair. "I love you," he said, "and it should have been too soon, too fast, too impossible, but it wasn't." "I love you too," Bethany whispered back. "That's what scares me." "Why?" "Because now I have something to lose." Preston pulled back, looking at her seriously. "Listen to me. You're going to be fine. The surgery is going to go perfectly, and I'm going to be there when you wake up. That's a promise." "You can't promise that. Watch me." 1 week before surgery, Preston proposed. They were having dinner at his house, nothing fancy, just pasta and wine and conversation. Preston suddenly stood up, looking nervous in a way Bethany had never seen. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing's wrong, everything's right, that's the problem." He ran a hand through his hair. "I had a whole plan. I was going to wait until after your surgery, until you were recovered. I was going to take you somewhere romantic, do this properly, but I can't wait." He pulled a small box from his pocket and Bethany's heart stopped. "I know this is fast. I know people will think we're crazy, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Preston opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band with a single diamond, elegant and understated. "Bethany Morgan, I love you. I love your mind, your heart, your courage. I love the way you see the world and the way you make me see it better. I want every moment with you, every day, every challenge and triumph. Marry me." Bethany stared at the ring, her mind racing. This was insane. They'd known each other less than 4 weeks. This violated every rule of rational decision-making. "Yes," she said, Preston's face transformed. "Yes. Yes. Absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her. Then he was kissing her and Bethany was crying again, but this time from joy. "I want to marry you before the surgery," Preston said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I know that sounds crazy, but I want you to be my wife. I want it legal, official. I want you to know that I'm committed to you, to us, no matter what happens." "Preston, you don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to, I want to. Please, Bethany, marry me this week." She should have been rational. She should have suggested waiting, seeing how the surgery went, giving themselves time. But Bethany had spent the last month learning that time wasn't guaranteed, that moments mattered, that love didn't follow a schedule. "Okay," she said. "Let's get married." They applied for a marriage license on Monday. In New York, there was a 24-hour waiting period, so they scheduled a City Hall ceremony for Wednesday, 5 days before Bethany's surgery. Preston wanted to tell people, wanted to share the news, but Bethany asked him to wait. "After," she said. "Let's tell everyone after. This is just for us right now." Wednesday morning dawned cold and clear. Bethany wore a cream-colored dress she'd found in a vintage shop in the village. Preston wore a dark suit and looked so handsome she could barely breathe. They met at the Manhattan Marriage Bureau with 2 witnesses, Helen from Preston's office and Marcus from Bethany's, both sworn to secrecy for the moment. The ceremony was brief, almost anticlimactic, but when the officiant pronounced them married and Preston kissed her, Bethany felt like the world had shifted on its axis. "Mrs. Irving," Preston murmured against her lips. "I'm keeping Morgan professionally," Bethany said, but she was smiling. They had lunch at the River Cafe, just the 2 of them, watching boats on the East River. Preston held her hand across the table, his wedding band glinting in the light. They'd chosen matching platinum bands, simple and strong. "I can't believe we did that," Bethany said. "Regrets?" "None. You?" "Not even close." Preston kissed her knuckles. "You're my wife. That's the best sentence I've ever said." That night, Bethany moved the last of her things into Preston's house. It was strange seeing her books on his shelves, her clothes in his closet. But it also felt inevitable, like this was where her life had been heading all along. Friday morning, the day before surgery, Bethany woke up terrified. Preston felt her panic and pulled her close. "Talk to me. What if something goes wrong? What if I'm not the same person afterward?" "Then we'll figure it out together. That's what marriage means. You signed up for this so fast. You barely know me. What if I'm different? What if you don't love who I become?" Preston turned her to face him, his eyes fierce. "Listen to me. I love you. Not some idea of you, not who I think you might be. You, the person you are right now and whoever you'll be tomorrow and every day after. That doesn't change because of surgery. You can't know that. I do know that, and I need you to trust me." He pressed his forehead to hers. "You're going to be fine. You're the strongest person I know." They spent Friday preparing. Bethany couldn't eat after midnight, so they had an early dinner, her favorite meal that Preston cooked perfectly. They watched the sunset over the Sound, wrapped in blankets on the deck, not talking much, just being together. "Thank you," Bethany said as the last light faded. "For what? For these weeks. For every moment. For not being afraid of my fear." Preston kissed her temple. "Thank you for letting me in." That night, Bethany couldn't sleep. Preston held her, his heart beat steady under her ear, and she tried to memorize the feeling, the safety of being exactly where she belonged. Surgery was scheduled for 7 in the morning. They arrived at Mount Sinai at 5:30, when the city was still mostly dark. Preston held Bethany's hand through check-in. through the pre-op preparations, through the endless questions from nurses and anesthesiologists. When they finally came to take her to the operating room, Bethany felt panic claw at her throat. "Preston," she gasped. "I'm here. I'm right here." He held her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You're going to be amazing. You're going to do this, and I'll be here when you wake up. I promise. I love you. I love you more than anything." He kissed her, soft and lingering. "See you soon, Mrs. Irving." They wheeled her away, and Bethany watched Preston standing in the hallway, his hand raised in a wave until the doors closed and he disappeared from view. The surgery took 6 hours. Preston spent every minute in the waiting room, pacing, unable to focus on his phone or the magazines or anything except the closed doors that separated him from Bethany. Helen came at lunch, bringing food he couldn't eat. Marcus stopped by after work, offering awkward comfort. "She's strong," Marcus said. "She'll be fine." Preston nodded, not trusting his voice. At hour 5, the neurosurgeon appeared, still in scrubs, and Preston's heart stopped. "Mr. Irving, the surgery went well. We were able to remove the entire tumor. There were no complications." The relief nearly buckled his knees. "Can I see her? She's in recovery now. Another hour or so and they'll move her to a room. You can see her then." That hour felt longer than the 6 before it. Preston called his mother, told her everything about Bethany, the marriage, the surgery. His mother cried and demanded to meet her new daughter-in-law as soon as possible. Finally, a nurse came to get him. "She's awake, but groggy. The anesthesia takes time to wear off." Bethany looked so small in the hospital bed, her head wrapped in bandages, monitors beeping steadily. But her eyes were open, and when she saw Preston, she smiled. "Hi," she whispered, her voice rough. "Hi yourself." Preston took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "How do you feel?" "Tired, head hurts." "I bet, but you did it. You're okay, you stayed." "Of course I stayed. I told you I would." He smoothed her hair back from her forehead, careful of the bandages. "I love you. Love you too." Her eyes were already closing again. "Stay. I'm not going anywhere." Recovery was hard. The first few days, Bethany could barely move without nausea and dizziness. Preston took a leave from work, staying by her side constantly. He helped her walk, monitored her medications, called the doctors when her pain got too intense. A week after surgery, the bandages came off. The incision site was healing well, the doctor said. No signs of infection. Bethany's vision was blurry, but that was expected, would improve with time. 2 weeks post-surgery, Bethany woke up in Preston's house, sunlight streaming through the windows, and realized she felt almost normal. The headaches were fading, the dizziness mostly gone. She got out of bed carefully, made her way downstairs, and found Preston in the kitchen making breakfast. "You're up," he said, immediately coming to her side. "Should you be up?" "I'm fine. Better than fine." She wrapped her arms around him. "I'm really okay, Preston." He held her tightly and she felt him shaking. "You scared me so much." "I know. I scared me too, but it's over. I'm okay." They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, the worst behind them. 3 weeks after surgery, Bethany got clearance from her doctor to return to work. Marcus welcomed her back with a cake and way too much fanfare. The Preston Irving article had been a massive success, and Marcus wanted her to do more CEO profiles. "Actually," Bethany said, "I should probably tell you something. Preston and I are married." Marcus's mouth fell open. "What?" "We got married the week before my surgery. I'm sorry I didn't tell you earlier, but everything was so crazy." "You married Preston Irving, the guy you interviewed?" "Yes." "This is the best story ever. Can I publish it?" "Absolutely not." But word got out anyway, the way these things do. The business press had a field day journalist marries billionaire CEO she was assigned to interview. The gossip sites were worse. speculating about scandals and ulterior motives. Preston handled it with grace, issuing a brief statement through his PR team confirming the marriage and requesting privacy. Bethany tried to ignore it, focusing on her work, on her recovery, on her new life. 4 weeks after surgery, Preston took her back to the city, to Osteria Morini, where they'd had their first date. This time, he'd reserved the entire private dining room. "This is excessive," Bethany said, but she was smiling. "I have something for you." Preston pulled out an envelope. Inside were plane tickets to Italy. 2 weeks in Tuscany, leaving in January. "Our honeymoon," Preston said. "The one we should have had. We're going to stay in a villa, drink too much wine, and remember what it feels like to not be scared." Bethany kissed him, tasting salt from her own tears. "You've given me so much. You gave me everything." Preston held her close. "When I met you, I was going through life on autopilot. Successful, sure, but not really living. You changed that. You made me remember what matters. I was so scared of loving you, scared of having something to lose. And now I'm scared of wasting a single moment we have." She pulled back, looking at him seriously. "I want kids. Someday, is that something you want?" Preston's face lit up. "Yes, absolutely yes. When you're ready, when we're ready, I want everything with you." The holidays came, their first as a married couple. Preston's mother flew up from Florida, and Bethany's family drove in from Missouri. The two mothers bonded instantly, spending hours in Preston's kitchen cooking and sharing embarrassing stories about their respective children. Bethany's father pulled Preston aside on Christmas Eve. "You take care of my girl." "I will, I promise. She's strong, but she's been through a lot this year. She needs someone who sees that strength." "I see it, I see her." Preston met the older man's eyes. "I know we did this fast. I know it's unconventional, but I've never been more certain of anything." Her father studied him, then nodded. "Good. Welcome to the family." January brought the trip to Italy, 2 weeks of golden sunshine and rolling hills and wine that tasted like earth and time. They stayed in a converted farmhouse, cooked meals with ingredients from local markets, made love with the windows open and warm breeze carrying the scent of olive groves. "This is perfect," Bethany said one afternoon, lying in a hammock with Preston, watching clouds drift across a blue sky. "It really is. I keep thinking about that first day when I walked into your office terrified about my surgery, trying to be professional. I never imagined this." Preston played with her hair, gentle and absent-minded. "I knew." "Knew what?" "That you were going to change my life. I took one look at you and thought, oh, this is going to be important, liar. I'm completely serious." He turned to look at her. "You walked into my office and you were so fierce, so focused, and I thought you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Then you started asking questions and you were brilliant and I was done. Completely gone." Bethany kissed him, slow and deep. "Best interview I ever did." They returned from Italy tan and rested, ready to face real life again. Bethany dove back into work, pitching a series on sustainable business practices that Marcus greenlit immediately. Preston returned to Irving Industries, but he'd changed his schedule, refusing to work weekends, coming home at reasonable hours. "Life's too short," he told his board of directors when they complained. "The company will survive without me working 80-hour weeks." Spring came, bringing warmth and new growth. Bethany's 6-month post-surgery checkup showed complete healing, no recurrence of the tumor, vision fully restored. The doctor declared her cancer-free, a term that made Bethany want to weep with relief. "We should celebrate," Preston said when she told him the news. They had dinner with friends, finally comfortable sharing their story publicly. Marcus gave a rambling toast about fate and journalism and finding love in unexpected places. Helen cried. Preston's mother called from Florida demanding details. That night, wrapped in Preston's arms in bed, Bethany felt the last of her fear finally release. "What are you thinking about?" Preston asked, his voice sleep rough. "How lucky I am, how different my life could have been." "Mine too," he kissed her shoulder. "I was existing, not living. You changed that. We changed each other." 6 months later, Bethany won an award for her sustainable business series. She stood on stage in a hotel ballroom, accepting the plaque, and she saw Preston in the audience, beaming with pride. "This award is wonderful," she said in her acceptance speech, "but it's not why I do this work. I tell stories because I believe in bearing witness, in documenting how people solve problems, build things, make the world slightly better. And I've learned that the best stories are about what we do with the time we have, how we choose to matter." Preston met her backstage, sweeping her into a hug. "That was incredible. You're biased, completely. Still true." That fall, Bethany found out she was pregnant. She took 3 tests, unable to believe the results, then scheduled a doctor's appointment to confirm. When the doctor smiled and said, "Congratulations," Bethany burst into tears. Telling Preston was the hardest secret she'd ever kept, even for a day. She wanted it to be perfect, memorable. She bought a tiny Irving Industries onesie from the company gift shop. Yes, they made those and wrapped it in a box. "What's this?" Preston asked when she presented it at dinner. "Open it," he did, and his face went through a series of expressions: confusion, realization, shock, joy. "You're pregnant." His voice cracked on the words, "I'm pregnant." Preston stood, then sat, then stood again, pulling Bethany into his arms. "We're having a baby. We're having a baby." He kissed her, his hands shaking as they framed her face. I love you so much." The pregnancy was easy, which Bethany joked was the universe's way of apologizing for the brain tumor. Preston was attentive to the point of being overbearing, reading every parenting book, preparing the nursery months early, talking to her belly when he thought she was asleep. "You're ridiculous," Bethany said fondly, watching him assemble a crib with intense focus. "I'm going to be a father. I'm allowed to be ridiculous." Their daughter was born on a warm May evening, arriving 3 days early with a healthy set of lungs. They named her Claire after Preston's grandmother, and she had Bethany's dark curls and Preston's eyes. Preston held his daughter for the first time with tears streaming down his face. "She's perfect. She really is." Bethany watched them, her heart so full it hurt. "Thank you," Preston whispered, kissing her forehead. "For this, for her, for everything." The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful and terrifying. Preston took paternity leave, and they figured out diapers and midnight feedings, and the strange joy of watching a tiny human discover the world. On their second wedding anniversary, Preston arranged for his mother to babysit Claire overnight. He took Bethany back to Connecticut, to his house that had become their home. 2 years, he said, pouring wine on the deck where they'd watched so many sunsets. Feels like forever and no time at all. I was thinking about that day I came to interview you, how scared I was. How certain I was that my life was falling apart. Instead, it was coming together. Bethany leaned against him, watching the water, their daughter sleeping peacefully inside. "I almost said no when you asked me to dinner. I was so afraid of losing something before I even had it." "I'm glad you didn't. Say no, I mean, me too." She turned to look at him, this man who had raced to marry her before surgery, who had promised every moment would matter. "You kept your promise, you know, about being there when I woke up, about making every moment count. That wasn't hard. Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from truly knowing someone. Bethany thought about that terrified young woman in the hospital waiting room, clutching her diagnosis, certain her life was ending. She hadn't known that across town, a CEO she'd never met was reading her article and thinking about asking for an interview. She hadn't known that fear and love could exist in the same space, that racing against time could lead to forever. "What are you thinking about?" Preston asked. "That I never expected any of this. The surgery, Claire, none of it was in my plan." "Better than your plan," Bethany smiled, kissing him softly. "So much better." Inside, their daughter started to fuss, and they both heard it instantly, the way parents do. But before they went to her, they took one more moment, just the two of them, holding onto each other under a sky full of stars. "I love you," Bethany said. "I love you more." "Impossible." Preston laughed, that full, genuine laugh she'd fallen in love with. "Come on, Mrs. Irving. Our daughter needs us." They went inside together, ready for middle-of-the-night feedings and all the beautiful, ordinary moments that made up a life. And Bethany thought about how scared she'd been of those 4 weeks before surgery, how certain she was that time was running out. She'd been wrong. Time hadn't run out. It had exploded into everything that mattered, into love and marriage and motherhood and all the messy, perfect moments in between. Years later, when Claire was old enough to ask about how her parents met, Bethany and Preston would tell her the story. They'd talk about articles and interviews, about brain tumors and racing against time, about deciding that love was worth the risk even when the future was uncertain. "So you married Dad before you even knew if you'd be okay?" Claire would ask, eyes wide. "I married your father because I wanted him to know I was committed, no matter what happened," Bethany would explain. "Sometimes you can't wait for the perfect time. Sometimes you have to trust that the person is worth it." "Was he worth it?" Claire would ask. And Bethany would look at Preston, her husband, her partner, the man who had promised to be there when she woke up and had kept that promise every day since. "More than worth it," she'd say. "Worth everything." But that conversation was years away. For now, on this anniversary night with their infant daughter between them, Bethany and Preston were simply living the life they'd built from fear and faith, and the decision to race toward love instead of away from it. The next morning, Bethany woke to find Preston already up with Claire, giving her a bottle while reading the newspaper. Domestic life suited him in ways she never would have predicted. "Morning," she said, kissing his cheek. "Morning. We let you sleep in. You're the best husband ever. Remember that when I forget to do the dishes later." They fell into their weekend routine, the rhythm they'd established over 2 years of marriage and 6 months of parenthood. Breakfast together, a walk into town with Claire in her stroller, lunch at the cafe that had become their regular spot. People recognized them now, the CEO and the journalist, the couple with the romantic story. Usually, Preston and Bethany ignored the attention, but today an older woman stopped them. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but I had to tell you, I read about your story in the paper last year. About how you got married before surgery. My husband died suddenly last month, heart attack, and I kept thinking about what you said about not wasting time." Her eyes filled. "I'm grateful I didn't waste time with him. Thank you for that reminder." After she left, Bethany leaned against Preston, emotional. "We did something right," he said softly. "We're still doing something right." That afternoon, Preston's mother video called to check on her granddaughter. "She's gotten so big. I swear she changes every time I see her." "You should come visit," Preston said. "We have plenty of room. Next month, I'm bringing Arthur." Arthur was her husband, the man who made her laugh. "He's dying to meet Claire." After the call, Preston set up Claire's playmat while Bethany made coffee. These were the moments she treasured most, the ordinary ones, the everyday life they'd built. "Hey," Preston said suddenly. "I've been thinking about something dangerous," he swatted at her playfully. "I'm serious. I want to start a foundation." For brain tumor research, supporting patients who can't afford treatment. I want to do something meaningful with the company's success." Bethany's heart swelled. "That's an incredible idea. I was hoping you'd help. Your journalism background, your understanding of storytelling. We could make a real difference." They spent the rest of the afternoon planning, Claire babbling happily between them. The foundation would launch next year, they decided. They'd call it the Tomorrow Foundation because every day was a gift, every tomorrow worth fighting for. As evening fell, Preston cooked dinner while Bethany played with Claire. She watched her daughter discover her own feat, that look of absolute wonder on her tiny face, and Bethany thought about how close she'd come to missing this. "What you thinking about?" Preston asked, appearing with a glass of wine for her, just grateful for all of it, even the scary parts because they brought me here. Preston set down his own glass, pulling her close. "You know what I think about sometimes? That day I got your article across my desk, I almost didn't read it. I was busy, distracted, but something made me stop and actually read it, and it changed everything. Fate, maybe, or just luck. Either way, I'll take it." They ate dinner as a family, Claire in her high chair making a glorious mess of pureed carrots. After, Preston gave Claire her bath while Bethany cleaned up. Then they switched, Preston handling kitchen duty while Bethany got Claire into pajamas. Bedtime routine was sacred. Story time, lullabies, the slow, gentle rocking until Claire's eyes finally closed. Tonight was Preston's turn, and Bethany watched from the doorway as her husband sang softly to their daughter, his voice carrying a tune Bethany recognized as one his own mother had sung to him. When Claire was finally asleep, they crept out of the nursery like teenagers sneaking past curfew. "Freedom," Preston whispered dramatically, "for approximately 3 hours until the next feeding." They settled on the couch with the baby monitor, Preston's arm around Bethany, her head on his shoulder. A movie played on the television, but neither of them really watched it. "I can't believe it's been 2 years, Bethany said. "Sometimes it feels like we just met, other times like I've known you forever. Both can be true." Preston played with her hair, a habit he'd developed early in their relationship. "I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life. But I also remember exactly what it felt like the first time I saw you. Tell me," like getting struck by lightning. Like every decision I'd made had led to that moment. Like I was finally exactly where I was supposed to be. Bethany turned to kiss him, slow and sweet. "I felt that too. Terrified me. Because of the surgery, because I knew. Deep down, I knew you were going to matter, and I was so scared of losing something that important." Preston's expression grew serious. "Can I tell you something I've never told you, always? The day of your surgery, when they wheeled you away, I went to the hospital chapel. I'm not particularly religious, but I sat there and I prayed, or tried to. Mostly I just made promises. If you were okay, I'd be better. I'd live differently. I'd never take a day for granted." Bethany's eyes filled. "Preston, I know it sounds silly, but I meant it. Every day I wake up next to you, every moment with Claire, I remember those promises. This life we have, I earned it by keeping my word. You were already better, already the person who keeps promises. Maybe. But you made me want to be even better." They stayed up talking after the movie ended, the way they often did. About work, about Claire's development, about plans for the foundation. About whether they wanted more children eventually, about where they'd be in 5 years, 10 years, 20. "I want to grow old with you," Preston said as they finally headed to bed. "I want to watch our kids grow up, have grandkids someday. I want decades." "Me too." Bethany squeezed his hand. "All the decades." The weeks turned into months and life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Bethany returned to work part-time, covering stories that mattered while still having time for Claire. Preston continued to restructure his work-life balance, proving that a CEO could actually have a personal life. The Tomorrow Foundation launched in September with a gala that raised $2 million in one night. Bethany gave a speech about her experience, about fear and hope, and the medical team that had saved her life. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Preston announced major grants to research hospitals and a patient assistance program for people who couldn't afford treatment. Nobody should have to choose between their health and their financial security, he said, and the audience erupted in applause. Claire's first birthday came in May, a celebration in their backyard with family and too much cake. She took her first wobbly steps that day, from Bethany to Preston and back again, both parents cheering like she'd won an Olympic gold medal. "Our baby's walking," Preston said, amazed. "She's growing up so fast. Should we give her a sibling?" Bethany looked at him, surprised. "Are you serious?" "Completely. I love being a dad, I love our family, and Claire would be an amazing big sister." They talked about it seriously over the next few months. Bethany's doctors assured her that another pregnancy would be fine, that the surgery wouldn't affect her ability to have more children. By Christmas, they decided to try. Their second pregnancy was announced on their third wedding anniversary. They'd gone back to Osteria Morini, their tradition now, and Preston had toasted to 3 years, a lifetime to go. "Also," Bethany had said, grinning, "we're having another baby." Preston had dropped his wine glass. Fortunately, it was empty. Their son, James, arrived the following August, a calm baby who seemed to observe the world with Preston's thoughtful expression. Claire, now 2.5, was instantly protective of her baby brother. "My baby," she'd announce to anyone who visited, standing guard by his bassinet like a tiny soldier. With 2 kids, life got exponentially more chaotic and more joyful. Preston and Bethany tag-teamed everything, supporting each other through sleepless nights and toddler tantrums and the particular madness of having both a newborn and a preschooler. "We're outnumbered now," Preston observed one particularly hectic morning. "We've got this," Bethany said, though she was holding a crying baby while Claire dumped cereal all over the floor. "Do we? Not even a little bit. But we'll figure it out." And they did, the way they figured out everything, together. Years passed in a blur of school plays and business deals, of family vacations and foundation galas, of ordinary moments and extraordinary memories. Claire started kindergarten, James learned to walk, and Bethany published a book about sustainable business practices that became a bestseller. Preston expanded Irving Industries into new markets while maintaining his commitment to renewable energy and fair labor practices. He won awards, gave speeches at business schools, mentored young entrepreneurs. But his favorite role was still Dad, the one that had him leaving the office at 5 to make it to soccer practice and dance recitals. On their 5th anniversary, they returned to Connecticut, to the house where it all began. Preston's mother watched the kids, giving them a rare night alone. 5 years, Bethany said, standing on the deck where they'd had so many important conversations. Half a decade. Best 5 years of my life, mine too. She turned to face him. Do you ever think about that first month, how fast everything happened all the time? People said we were crazy rushing into marriage. Were they right? Preston pulled her close. Not even a little bit. Every instinct I had was telling me you were it, and I was right. I was so scared. I know, but you were brave anyway. That's what I love about you. You feel the fear and do it anyway. They made love that night with the windows open, the sound of waves mixing with their breathing. Afterward, Bethany traced the lines of Preston's face in the moonlight. "What?" he asked, smiling. "Just memorizing you, making sure I never forget this moment." "I'm not going anywhere. I know. but I like remembering anyway. The next morning, they picked up the kids and drove into the city for brunch. Claire chattered about her upcoming dance recital while James colored quietly, already showing signs of his father's focused concentration. "Mommy, will you be there?" Claire asked. "At my recital, of course. Daddy and I both will be." "Promise." Bethany and Preston exchanged a look, remembering promises made and kept. "Promise," they said together. That afternoon, walking through Central Park with their children, Bethany thought about that terrified young woman who'd sat in a hospital waiting room 5 years ago. She'd been so certain her life was ending, so afraid of what the future held. She hadn't known that her life was actually beginning. That fear would transform into courage, that uncertainty would become clarity, that racing against time would lead to forever. "What are you smiling about?" Preston asked, James on his shoulders, Claire holding his hand. "Just happy," Bethany said, taking his free hand. "Ridiculously, perfectly happy. Me too." They walked on, a family of 4 in a city of millions, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Behind them, 5 years of love and laughter and ordinary miracles. Ahead, decades more to come, every moment mattering, every day a gift, and Bethany knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice all those years ago. When Preston had asked her to dinner, when he'd proposed after 3 weeks, when he'd wanted to marry her before surgery, when he'd promised every moment would matter, he'd been right. Every moment did matter, and together they'd made every single one count.